want to talk about two things, and then hopefully we have plenty of time for Q&A. And the first one was kind of the agency level view on, continuing to improve our ability to formulate and implement programs and projects, and the importance of that to the success of the agency's missions, as well as the success of the agency, in general, right? And how important that is. And then the second thing I was going to talk about was just leadership, and just my thoughts on leadership, leading teams, and being successful as a leader of an organization, or the leader as a program or a project, and then go to questions. So that might be the most useful thing. So first, very early on, when Jim Bridenstine became administrator and then Jim Mohart became deputy administrator, they made it clear that improving program project performance was a priority for them. We had to avoid some things that we had done in the past, hopefully the more distant past, that the improvement really was, needed to be in the larger programs or projects. I think over the last decade, we've done a lot better in formulating programs and developing plans that are more robust and more executable for our, smaller and medium-sized program projects, including our spaceflight missions, right? So I think if you look particularly at the Science Mission Directorate and their performance over the last 10 or so years on the small and medium programs, projects, missions, you'll see, the schedule and cost performance is pretty good. It's a lot better than it had been probably in the previous decade. But it was the large programs and projects where we were really challenged, and we were really struggling. And that was about the time, that we also had a major schedule slip and overrun on the James Webb Space Telescope, and had to do another major replan on James Webb. That's been a priority, for this, this administrator from pretty much day one. And, it's important for many reasons. One primary one is, developing credibility with our stakeholders. We're proposing, with support of this administration, doing even more ambitious robotic missions like Mars sample return, doing things that we haven't done in a while, like the X-59 low boom flight demonstrator. It's been quite a while since we've developed a piloted X-plane, and of course Artemis, and returning, and having the first man and next one walk on the moon in 2024. So, given we're challenged with these very ambitious things to do that are going to require additional support and additional money, additional larger budgets, we have to develop a credibility through a good track record of formulating and implementing programs, so that our stakeholders will trust us with these additional resources that are required to meet these really ambitious goals and missions. Actually the first thing I did when I took over the Space Technology Mission Director was say, hey, our number one priority has to be, looking at all our programs and projects, making sure we have plans that are executable and robust and reasonable from a risk standpoint, adjusting if we necessary to, and then delivering on those commitments that we're making to the agency and with our stakeholders. Because without that trust that we build by delivering on our commitments, and I think the first order to our stakeholders, that's our missions. We're not going to have the ability to get the support and resources to do more ambitious things. So this is really, obviously it's important for the missions, and that's the core of what we do. But it's also strategically important being able to garner the support to do these even more ambitious things. There's two things we definitely are trying to avoid, which I don't think we've done in the recent past, and I've actually read some things on like large infrastructure projects, that cities and states take on and why those go so badly. And they talk about two primary reasons for that. And one is called strategic misrepresentation. I think we would call that buying in, where we would develop, we would be given a set of constraints, right? And we try to develop a plan that fits in with those constraints. But when we step back and look at that plan, we're like, whoa, this really isn't robust. This is really risky. I'm not sure we believe that as we confirm this mission, we can actually bring it in on this schedule and this budget. But if we don't push forward with a less robust plan, given these constraints, we're not going to be able to move forward, right? We're going to have to delay and figure out other ways to do it, and we may never get support. And so I think we would call that kind of buying in. Hey, we're going to confirm this mission, knowing that we don't have the most robust plan, but we'll go figure when things go badly. We go figure it out later, right? We'll fix it later. We'll get more money later, et cetera. And again, that just sets us up for losing credibility and losing support, right, with our stakeholders and with the public. And so we definitely want to not buy in and be in this mode where we're perpetrating what's some call strategic misrepresentation, right? That we can do something for a certain budget on a certain schedule because those are the constraints that have been given. But if we really objectively look at it, it's not a way we can pull it off. It's really high risk. So I don't think we've done that in the recent past, and we really need to avoid that as we move forward, particularly on the large things that we're trying to do, the major programs we're trying to do. The second thing is what they call optimism bias. And what this is kind of represented in, I've been a standing review board chair for a bunch of missions. And when we use data like analogies, and we use parametric cost estimating, which is drawing on historical data, right, for program project performance, right? There's data behind those parametric methods. And I say, hey, it's going to take a year longer than you're saying, and $100 million more. And the program manager will come back and say, but we're going to do better this time. I know we can do, even though my program, just like these other 3 or 4 or 5 programs, right, that took longer and more money, we're going to do better this time. And they'll rationalize how they're going to do better this time. And that may or may not be true. So there's this kind of, optimism, and sometimes it's warranted and sometimes it's not. We're being overly optimistic about, why we're going to do better on this mission than we did on the previous 5. Also, I think engineers just sort of, when you do a bottoms up cost estimate, engineers and your subsystem managers will just kind of be overly optimistic about the time and the resources it's going to require to get something done. And we need to guard against that, right? So, the best way to guard against that is to use experience, is to use previous projects. First use the experience of your team and yourselves, right? And what given the size of mission, the class of mission, et cetera, the category of mission, right, and the risk posture. What is a reasonable estimate and what reasonable approach, right, to get things done. So I think that's avoiding, being realistic and just sanity check at ourselves. Are we being overly optimistic here? Is the optimism bias creeping in, or is this really a solid, estimate for the program and project, given we have a solid set of requirements? So I think that's the other thing we need to be, we can fall into, and we kind of need to guard against. we, like I said, for a decade, we were doing well in improving project performance. I think, the agency leadership all the way down through the organization had a demonstrated commitment to doing that. And then we ran into some significant issues on JWST and NRI and SLS and EGS on the exploration systems development, and we sort of had to take a step back and look at, okay, what could we do to improve here? So we are perpetually on the GAO high risk list because our programs are really challenging and difficult to do, and we have challenges in execution. So we worked with the mission directorates and centers, program project managers, practitioners, right? People who have been program project managers for a while to develop a corrective action plan to try to improve our program project performance. And part of how GAO evaluates you is on do you have a commitment to improving your performance? And so this, putting this corrective action plan, not only we needed to do it to kind of take it to improve, but also to gain credibility with the Hill. So a few things we did, we enhanced earned value management implementation and how we used earned value management. I think it's working. I see EVM data every month at the baseline performance review, and I'm also seeing, and more importantly, I'm seeing programs and projects use the EVM data to say, a SPI of 0.5 or 0.6, for 2 months here is probably a leading indicator that we're headed to a bad place here from schedule performance perspective. Hey, we need to do a deep dive, and figure out why SPI is 0.6 and why it's not up at 0.8 or 0.9 or 0.9 something where it needs to be if we're going to bring this, project in on cost and schedule. So, the data has to be valid, and we've had a problem getting, good EVM data particularly out of our contractors, and even sometimes out of center led programs. So the data has to be valid, and so we've worked on that, and then making sure we're looking at CPI and SPI, and when the trend is not good, you were up at 0.9 and starting to head down, that program project takes action and say, okay, why? What's going on here, and what corrective actions do we have to take to get our performance back to where it needs to be, to not end up in a position where we've eroded all our schedule margin, all our budget reserves, and then unless we can descope, unless there are descopes to take, but the farther you get into a program, the less effective descopes are. Then we're looking to head for a rebaseline. We've also, trying to strengthen our program planning and control capability, our ability to, particularly in both the formulation and implementation, develop and track the good estimates. And so we upped our training curriculum for PP&C to make sure we have a cadre of folks who are trained, who can step into those roles on programs. We created a technology readiness assessments best practice document. I think that's also really important. I remember on JWST early on, before they let the big contract for the spacecraft and ramped up the optical telescope instrument development, they had a phase where it was called kind of like the technology risk reduction phase, and they actually had a technology non-advocate review to remind them to mature those technologies to TRL 5 or 6 before they started in initiating the large systems development activity. I think that worked in some cases and didn't work in others. I think one thing there is, it's one thing to develop a detector and measure the detector array performance, on the bench. It's another to integrate that detector array into, with the drive electronics, with the readout electronics, with the aft optics, et cetera, and measure that detector array, that focal plane array, and look at system performance. And I think one area where we may have been penny wise and pound foolish is in deciding on some programs not to do brass boards, prototypes, or engineering models. You might save some money up front in not doing engineering models, but you can pay for it big time on the back end because you didn't ring out all the technologies, ring out the design, make the changes before you went to, proto-flight development or qual unit development and on-flight development. So, I think really need to look at, okay, is it really going to save us money? Not budgeting for engineer models, brass boards, prototypes, whatever it is, to make sure, we are really reducing risk in formulation. Or is it going to bite us on the back end because we're going to run into all sorts of problems in manufacturing, integration, and test. So that's just something to think about, right? Also, the other thing, this is sort of random thoughts, but the other thing engineering models do for you is if you run into a problem with a flight unit, right, in INT, you can swap out the flight unit for the engineering model, keep INT moving forward, fix the problem you have on the flight unit, and then swap back engineering model out, flight unit back in. Gives you a level of flexibility in INT that you don't have if you don't have an engineering model swapping, and you got to take the flight one, take one of the critical CMDH boxes out, and you're just dead stop in INT because you don't have an engineering unit to keep you going. So just another thing to think about. So that's something we talked about with respect to, really making sure you really reduce the risk of technologies maybe tested in the subsystem or system and ring it out before you declare, hey, we're a TRL 6, by PDR, we're good. We've met the 7125 requirement. We're good to go, right? So anyway, just another thing. Let's see some other things. We updated our policy for probabilistic probabilistic analysis. So that's really junk confidence level. So that, if you rebaseline your you're a category 1 program and you rebaseline, you have to do a JCL. If you have if it looks like, later, like you're headed towards KDPD and you get a significant, even though you didn't rebaseline, there's a significant replan that's done, probably need to do a JCL, right? So, and I think, and we've argued too, and, there's a point probably later in a program, if you have schedule challenges that, and you pretty much have a single path, you're in system level INT, the highest level of INT, and you have the kind of this single line schedule that you finish INT, to finish up performance testing and get through environmental testing, right? That, going through a full up, JCL is probably not worth doing, but doing a schedule risk analysis is worth doing, right? So where you really look at all the risks, the potential schedule impact of those risks, and then run a simulation to see what that does to your, based on the probability of occurrence and the impacts, what could that do to your completion date and your launch date, and do you have enough schedule reserves? At that point, the budget reserves are pretty easy to figure out because you're an INT, you have a marching army, and you have a monthly burn rate, right? And you just, if you got to slip by 6 months, you multiply by, your burn rate by 6, and you're good to, and you have your budget, right? And then the schedule risk assess, then you have funded schedule reserve, right? So anyway, I think we've used on programs that are in the later stages, we've used SRA fairly effectively to either confirm we have a launch date that's reasonable or no, we need to slip, and this is how much, and this is the money that's required to fully fund those schedule reserves. Let's see. Well, one other thing, a couple other things real quick, and then I'll move on. We've created a schedule repository, just like we've created a cost repository for programs. So Cadre is our cost repository. So during formulation, you can go back and look, and there's data to look at previous program performance from a cost perspective. We're creating that same sort of cadre for schedule and schedule performance. So you can go back and look at schedule performance from previous programs and see, and you use that to, as a way to do analogies. And then we looked at enhancing performance indicators, developing an enhanced set of performance indicators, and including technical performance metrics. We have some TPNs in 7120.5, but also not only TPMs, but programmatic indicators. What we decided to do there was develop a set of kind of best practices and put that in the project management handbook, and then just allow the program manager to decide which TPMs, which programmatic indicators are best to use for their program to monitor performance, see where hopefully some of them are leading indicators so they can get out ahead of problems, put a corrective action plan in place, and get the program back on track. So there are no requirements for that, but we did kind of enhance the indicators part in the project management handbook. And then at like PDR, we're going to want to see, hey, what are you using for TPMs? What are you using for other programmatic indicators like milestone trend track, milestone tracking and trending, right? That'll give you an indication whether, as well as EVM, give you an indication whether you're on track or you're not on track. So just that's something, again, we've taken some concrete action there to try to put some policies in place and some practices in place to improve program project management performance. I'm running out of time, so leadership real quick. It's really important to, team building is incredibly important in general, but particularly for programs and projects, right? And I think there are several things that are really important to our folks in feel like being part of a team, being motivated and driven, and forming a high performing team. One is I think people want to feel like they're contributing to something important. They want to feel like what they're doing is going to make a difference for the agency and particularly the nation and the world. So I think it's really important to connect your team with the goals and objectives of the mission. Like in science, the groundbreaking science we're going to do with this mission, and as a way to bring the team together and for a common purpose, right? Which then you'll have a an intrinsically motivated, self-motivated team. So I think this sense of purpose, sense of making sure they understand why that they're contributing to something that's really important, and how their contribution is important to enabling that. I think that's really important. I think the second thing that's important is that they feel like they have responsibility for something, right? That, hey, you're the subsystem manager, you're responsible for this subsystem. Here are my expectations for you as the subsystem manager, right? Now, they have to have authority that goes with that responsibility, right? Here's what you can decide. Here's what you have, in your that I'm expecting you to do, and here's what I'm expecting comes to me, for review and approval, right? And make sure you're on track. But I think that being responsible for something, being delegated that responsibility along with the appropriate authority, and then being held accountable is I think that's I've always felt more fulfilled in my job when I was given something to do and given the support to do it, and then I was able to figure it out and actually go do it, than when I was just tasked and I felt like I was a staff person. I was just tasked to do a set of tasks, and I was micromanaged, right? And I wasn't really allowed to go figure it out on my own. Now, I always had the ability to go to my supervisor, go to my project manager, or whoever, and get help if I got stuck, right? It's not, just throw a person in the deep end and it's sink or swim. But I think that being able to have responsibility for something is important. And then the other thing that's important is that, people feel like they're challenged and they're learning and they're growing, right? And that we're looking for, I always felt like my next assignment was just a little bit beyond what I felt comfortable with. from an experience and capability standpoint. But that was okay because that accelerated my learning and growth, right? And if I was given my next assignment was just like my previous assignment, and I know how to do this, no problem. I got, so that providing stretch, the next assignment's a stretch assignment, again, with the support to be successful. I think people will feel more like they're learning and growing the opportunity, and they'll ultimately have an opportunity to advance. And then, there's some other things that have been really important that I've had to kind of have been learned behaviors by me. One is assuming positive intent. You'll hear something second or third hand, and we all have kind of histories with organizations and people. Some of that history is positive, some of it's not so good, right? But I always try to say, okay, I'm going to assume this person is doing this because they're looking out for the best interests of the organization, of the program. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to get more data and just verify that there's nothing going on here. Somebody's doing something that's at cross purposes with the organizational goals and objectives of the program, goals, objectives, et cetera. So I think that decreases your probability of having a not so productive interaction with somebody. And I definitely have learned the limitations of email. There's only so much bandwidth in email communications. So when a potential problem pops up, I'm usually going to call a meeting or pick up the phone and call somebody and not rely on email necessarily. The second thing is, risk management is, project management, a big part of project management is risk management, right? And of course, you need to have a good risk management system and a way to effectively implement that, right? And that's in our NPRs. But you will get to a point in the program where you have to balance the benefits of moving forward with the risks of moving forward. We always accept residual risk on a mission, right? The risk is what we do is inherently dangerous and risky, and we will always fly a mission. Doesn't matter whether it's an X-plane or a robotic mission or a human spaceflight mission with residual risk. We just need to make sure that we've identified the risks, we've mitigated the ones we have to mitigate and we can mitigate, and the residual risk is acceptable, and the benefits of moving forward are worth taking those risks. We've had many discussions about the benefits of moving forward with the uncrewed flight test and then the crewed flight test in the commercial crew program versus taking the time to further mitigate risk. And at some point, we all looked at each other and said, okay, moving forward is the right thing to do. We've mitigated all the risk. We're willing to accept the residual risk. Let's go fly. And every program has to get to that point. So that's what we call kind of risk leadership, balance the benefits and the risks, and but eyes wide open, right? That this is the residual risk that we are accepting. The other thing is we've been working on is improving decision velocity, and part of that is governance and having good decision-making processes in place to make effective decisions in a timely manner. The other part of it is delegating. I've really tried to push things out of the A suite, delegate things to mission directorates and centers, and have them further delegated on down through the organization, so that we're giving the decision making responsibility to the lowest practical level that we can delegate that decision to try to increase the decision velocity, and not get locked up as when we can get locked up sometimes or delay, and we have to raise things up through the organization. So increasing decision velocity is another thing we've worked on. And then I've always valued my team. I don't know how we would have gotten through COVID without the great leadership team we have at the agency senior level and all the way down through the agency. So, particularly as your programs are larger, you move up through the organization, You really need to rely on your team, and part of that is is listening, right? An issue comes up, I get a group together, I frame the issue, and then I listen. I let the conversation grow. I draw people into the conversation who are not participating. That I invited them to the meeting, so I expected that they would. Then I'll kind of summarize the key points from that discussion, and then we'll move in the action plan. What does the action plan need to be, and we'll work the actions. I'll kind of summarize and say, here are the 4 actions I think we need to take coming out of here. Who needs to take them, when they're due. We all agree, yep, those are the right 4 actions, or no, wait a second, there's a 5th one. Okay, we'll add the 5th one, and then we'll go and we'll get back together. So, I would not be able to do this job. It'd be really impossible to do the job I'm in now without relying on the great team we have at the agency level to take advantage of some of the opportunities we have, as well as solve some of the challenges we had. And COVID has been an incredibly large challenge. So, relying on the team and listening and allowing people to provide, input based on, their experience, because, their experience is going to be different than mine, is going to be different than somebody else's. So that diversity of experience, tends to allow you to develop the best solutions to problems, or the best plans to take advantage of opportunities. So with that, Walt, I'll just stop there. I talked more than 25 minutes, probably a little bit more than 30, but I think we have about 15 minutes or so for Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. And excellent point, Steve. So I really appreciate that. And by the list of questions I have for you, there's a lot of interest. So let's dive into it. The top question that I have right now on the list, which got 26 votes, if there's an administration change, what impacts to the agency or our programs do you anticipate?
Yeah, that's really hard to tell without until there is an administration change.
Right.
So the way the process works is, we can only have one administration at a time. so we're not engaging anybody from the Biden campaign at all right now. Or you can only have one president, one administration at a time.
Yeah.
However, if there is a change in administration, we are preparing information in case there is a change in administration. So our top 10 challenges, white papers on each mission area and some of the functional areas, and et cetera. So we are preparing a set of background material. We are, and so this is kind of phase 1. Phase 2 will be between the election and inauguration. So that's when we will be able to engage the transition team, the landing team, whatever they're going to call it, and get a sense for, kind of get them up to speed on where we are, and get a sense for where the priorities might be different. And you can guess at some of those, right? I mean, earth science, that I think that'll be a priority. Right. Maybe aeronautics research, might be a priority, et cetera. So I don't know, but that you can guess, right? So that'll be the time where, we'll get a first indicator of what the priorities and the shifts might be. And then after inauguration, obviously it'll be, transition of power, and then we'll be working directly with the administration. I will tell you, I've talked to, I think, one of my A-Suite colleagues has been through this 4 times, I think. 3 or 4 times. I'm not sure he was in the H.W. Bush to Clinton, but definitely the Clinton to Bush and Bush to Obama and Obama to Trump. So at least 3 times. Yeah. And everyone is different. Right. Everyone is different. Everyone approaches it differently. So we'll just wait and see if there is one, and what we get from the transition team, and then eventually the administration.
Okay, excellent. Our next question comes from Danny Glavin. What do you think is the biggest public misconception about NASA?
Yeah, so probably, I think one thing that is sort of shocking to me is people think our budget is way bigger than it really is.
Uh-huh.
Either in absolute terms, hundreds of billions of dollars, or in relative terms. It's like what 0.5% of the federal budget, right?
Right.
It's like half of 1% of the federal budget. So that's one thing that kind of surprises me. The other thing is, that's one misconception. The other thing, and I think we're overcoming that now, but after shuttle retirement, it's like NASA's going out of business.
Right.
It's like that's the end of NASA. We're going out of business, because to many people in the general public, the human spaceflight program is NASA, right? Mm. They're not connected to the science missions. They're not connected to the research and technology development. The most visible thing is the human spaceflight program.
Yep.
Right. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think that's in the general, beyond the 5% of people that are really know space and follow space, the other 95% is the human spaceflight program. After shuttle retirement. Now, I think we've overcome that. We're overcoming that with Commercial Crew, the launch in May and the return in August of the Demo 2 mission, et cetera. So, I think that it's been that the Demo 2 mission and the Mars 2020 mission were both really good for the country, not only for NASA, but for the country, because they were kind of bright spots in the middle of some really tough times with COVID and social unrest, right, in the economy. So I think, that's one of the things we do. It's we contribute to national pride and inspiration, right? And I think that was one of our contributions in the last 6 months was those 2 missions really showed that, hey, NASA is alive and well. We're moving forward. Even in COVID, we're able to do some really tough things like, the first crew launch from U.S. soil in almost a decade, and this really ambitious, robotic mission to Mars. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Our next question is, considering the current climate, what advice would you give to the NASA managers and leaders to promote a valued and diverse workforce within the programs and projects?
Yes, I think, the most important thing for our folks right now is that we're listening, right? We're listening to what they're not only, what they, in particular, listen to what they're feeling, right? Because a lot of it is what they're feeling. And, what I'm feeling is just what I'm feeling, right? It's not,
right.
It's not necessarily anybody else's reality. It's not, it just is what it is, right? If I'm angry, I'm just angry, right? Now, I try to figure out why I'm angry and deal with it. But, if I get angry, it's just it's an emotion, right? It's a feeling. So listening is really important. I think empathizing, right? Say, yeah, I really understand how that could be really a problem for you and a challenge for you. And I've never experienced that, but I can see, so empathy is really important. And the other thing that's really important is, how can I help? As the manager, how can I help? And some people will say, I'm okay. Somebody say, I could really use, this. And then, I think I think the Unity campaign is really important. We're developing an agency level action plan around the Unity campaign. We're taking the time to do that so that it really is going to help us move forward, including ways in which we can measure progress on how we're promoting diversity, inclusion, and unity, and valuing everybody's contribution. So I think that that listening, empathizing, and supporting is really important. And then we are going to put more to come, because we are going to put some concrete things in place at the agency level, particularly around developing people, make sure everybody has an opportunity. Because if everybody has an opportunity and we're continue to try to recruit a diverse workforce, then we'll have a pipeline of people, for program positions, and we can draw on that diverse pipeline, right, and pick the best people. And if we're continuing to have a diverse workforce and increasing the diversity through recruiting and retention, and we're giving everybody a chance to advance and learn and grow, then we'll create this diverse pipeline that we can draw from. And that's